everything is auto tracked and graphed in the app, so you don't need to worry about that concurrent tracking, which is definitely one of the things that is pretty tricky about DTT from a technician standpoint. It's kind of like a juggling act. There's so many different things you have to be doing at the same time. So tracking that data and keeping on top of what's been happening while you're also delivering those programs and supporting a learner can be really difficult to do. So it's all tracked automatically for you.
Okay. Welcome back, everybody, to the Gold Standard Podcast. Today, we are rejoined by Patrick Vega. He is the CEO, the owner, and the creator of FirstWork, which is a data collection app that has done wonders so far, and we are catching up to see what he's been up to. So, Patrick, take it away. What have you been up to?
Yeah, it's been quite some time. So we caught up the first time a little bit over a year ago. It's crazy how the time has flown. And
Yes.
at the time, we were just launching our DTT application, and we're kind of just getting off the ground with the early stages of things. And one of the big things on the radar at the time was our first research study. So since then, a lot has changed. We had a pretty small number of users at the time, and now we have over 25,000 BCBAs and RBTs using the platform. And we've
Wow.
also released our first research study, which has had some really exciting results. We were able to share all about that at ABAI. So it's been a big year and some change for us for sure on a lot of different fronts.
Now, kind of going back to the very beginning, what was your initial vision and how has it changed from then to where you are now?
Yeah, it's a great question. Our initial vision was really to provide an alternative to doing DTT with paper-based materials. So most DTT lessons are delivered with paper-based flashcards that you print and laminate, and that whole process has a lot of downsides, notably that there's just a lot of preparation work that goes into that, and it's in a format that some learners don't find very enjoyable. You have to go to a tabletop setting and do the program there, and it's one of those programs that a lot of learners don't have a ton of fun doing. So after seeing
Yeah.
that, wanted to do something that could provide a different option for a new way to deliver those programs. And since learners love tablets, it felt like a really natural thing to kind of transition the programs over to. So that was really our initial vision behind the platform, as well as innovating in the reward space. And frankly, not that much has changed in terms of the general vision. We've really just been expanding on that core concept. When we first launched the app, we had some basic matching and receptive programs, which was a really nice way to start to get some initial feedback and get people, something that they could start using. And the main thing that's changed in that period of time has been really the breadth and depth of the platform. So at the time, we had about two different types of learning activities that you could do, matching and receptive, and now there's well over 15. So you can run basically any common assessment, at least the DTT portions of it, using the application. And then we've also added a ton of different customization options based on feedback from teams who are using it. So doing all sorts of little things that make it possible for you to customize the delivery of programs in a similar way that you would with traditional cards. Because of course, one of the great things about DDT, especially with the physical cards, is that you can present things in such a kind of custom and unique way for any individual learner, depending on what their needs are. So that's been a space that we've really been focused a lot on, is being able to mimic the types of things you can do with traditional cards, but in a digital setting. So generally speaking, the vision has remained fairly intact, but we've just kind of been going a lot deeper into it and then expanding the types of things you can do with the platform.
During that time with expanding the platform and adding all of these usages to it, what do you think was the biggest challenge that you guys ran into?
I think that the biggest challenge has been just how robust DTT is as a type of activity. So if you think about the way that you traditionally set up and deliver DTT programs, you can be very specific about the exact images that you want to use, the exact way you want to deliver programs, and there's just lots of different components to that, whether it's the SD or the pacing or the presentation style. It's really a flexible and broad way of delivering learning lessons. And so being able to capture all of that nuance in an application just requires lots and lots of growth and iteration to really kind of match what you're traditionally doing with cards. So I would say that that's been the biggest challenge. Is just that DTT itself is really a pretty big thing. And so, if you have a portion of that covered, that's useful in that portion of scenarios, but doesn't really allow you to cover the broad range of, what you'd want to do. So getting to a point where you can really replace that flashcard deck has required a huge set of, additions from the content perspective and then the customization perspective, just to make it comparable with what you could do with traditional cards. So I'd say that's been, kind of the biggest thing for us is just, kind of reckoning with what DTT really is and kind of the myriad ways that looks, and being able to systematize that in different ways so that you can capture a lot of those important elements.
That's cool.
Now, being as we have two great BCBAs sitting right next to me, I'm sure they appreciate having like a large variety of differences in that DTT app itself. What's some great feedback that you've gotten from some of the other organizations or essentially clients that you've worked with that have used FirstWork and have just kind of been like, what have we been doing not using you before?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing that teams have found, is that learners often just enjoy the programs a lot more. So when you're running DTT with cards, it's very uncommon for a learner to like ask to do more DTT after they finish their session. That pretty much doesn't happen. But with FirstWork, it's something that happens pretty regularly. We get these wonderful notes all the time from teams who are working with learners who just enjoy the experience in a significant way. They, find it fun and engaging. It's, kind of quick and dynamic in a way that traditional flashcard-based programs often kind of can't be, just because there's a lot of setup and sort of slowness in the process because there's a lot that the technician needs to do in order to set up those programs. And so the kind of learner enjoyment side of things has been one of the components that has really stood out to a lot of teams, as significantly different with traditional programs, which a lot of learners find aren't very enjoyable. So that's probably been the biggest thing that stood out to a lot of teams. And the reason why that's been the case in most situations, and this is all learner to learner, there's kind of different profiles that could be drawn towards the experience more than others. But it's a couple different components that seem to be pretty important. One of them is that there's a lot more flexibility in the way that you can deliver a program with a tablet, just because you don't need to make that physical transition to a space that's suitable for DTT. So before any traditional program, you kind of need to go from whatever you were doing to a place that's typically dedicated to this kind of activity, kind of disrupting the session and then taking a while to do that. So a lot less in the way of transitions. It's something that's a little bit quicker to kind of get into and get out of compared to a traditional program. And then something that we saw in the research, which we think has been a really important component of the application, is that the trials can often be completed a lot more quickly by learners. So in our research study, we were seeing learners going at a pace of 20 trials per minute. And this was with 3-year-old learners who had no previous exposure to DTT. So that's pretty quick compared to what you traditionally do with cards. Of course,
Yeah.
it's also learner by learner, but you might expect to see something like 5 to 10 trials per minute, if you're moving pretty quickly. So we're seeing, sometimes double or quadruple what you might expect with traditional cards. And so that takes an experience which, would traditionally take a while. You have to transition over to a table. You need to do the trials and then wait for the next trial to be presented. And then with an application, because all of that setup is done by the app, there's just a lot less downtime in between the trials. So you can kind of go through your program much more quickly and transition away from it, which seems to make the experience a lot more enjoyable for a lot of learners, who just find that kind of quick and speedy learning experience with really dynamic and quick feedback is kind of a engaging and fun activity, where sometimes it's not the case with traditional programs.
I mean, from a clinician standpoint, I feel like we've all experienced death by lamination.
Yeah.
So being able to have a tablet with everything already encompassed on it,
Yeah.
to even just to conduct a VB map initial assessment is amazing, because the amount of exchanging of materials and creation of new materials, or even if there's like a behavior within the time that you're presenting those DTT trials, or they get ripped and destroyed. So it just reduces a lot of that response effort and makes that go so much more fluently than it would in the past. So I definitely could see that appreciation from anybody that's using your platform.
Yeah, that's from an organizational impact perspective, that typically ends up being what we talk about a lot, where teams spend a lot of time on material preparation. A lot of that time that's admin time, which is really sought after. There's just so many things outside of direct clinical services that are important, and it's hard to find time for everything. So if you're spending a lot less time printing and laminating, you can spend more time doing other things. And printing and laminating is also fairly expensive, even if you're using a laser printer and kind of doing everything right. you're still probably spending about 50 cents per page that you make with four images on it. And so if you're
That
doing, dozens or hundreds, that adds up really quickly.
that and technically it's in a lot of funding sources, it's not billable to create materials.
Correct.
Yeah.
So cutting that out as well, like not just reducing the response effort, but also taking away that financial burden of, or your own personal time that you're doing these things gives clinicians a lot of time back that could be valued or put towards something else.
And Pat, you had the data for that at one point, correct? You had the estimated number of hours that a BCBA would spend.
Yeah, it's something like 3,000 hours over the course of your career if you're doing about 2 hours a week of prep. So yeah, in more normal terms, that's like 1.5 years of 40-hour work weeks. So prep really does add up over a career. And sometimes it's not BCBAs doing, but for an average caseload, there's going to be 2 to 4 hours of prep that happens on a weekly basis. So if you can cut out a lot of that, that's just going to create a lot more time for everything else, regardless of how you kind of budget for that time. And like you all were saying, sometimes that's going to be, direct admin time. Sometimes that's going to be taking that work home with you. In any case, it's something that you really can't bill for. So it kind of ends up either being something that has a negative impact on culture, where it's kind of an additional work task that there isn't really a great place for. So people take it home and that often doesn't feel great. Or it's something where companies are essentially paying out of pocket to have folks do this material preparation work, and they're not ever going to get reimbursed for that time. So it's essentially a direct operation cost that you have to bear. And so being able to move away from that when you have access to a tool that can kind of cover that really helps with reducing some of those line items on the material prep front.
It definitely makes it more sustainable. You know what I mean? Like, 'cause if you're paying clinicians to create materials and it comes off the bottom line for like a business, then it really does increase that revenue. And over time, it's a large chunk of change, which kind of brings me to my next question. So for a larger organization or even a school district who's possibly interested in utilizing the platform, how does that work subscription wise? Is it like Netflix, where if you're 2 or more, you have to pay an additional fee, or does each time somebody wants to use it, they'd have to repurchase the platform?
Yeah, we actually have a pretty neat model for organizations that helps us right size depending on the amount of preparation they do. Just, as a example, like if you're an early intervention focused organization, you're going to be doing a lot of DCT in a lot of cases. So material prep is really front and center in your mind. If you work with a larger population, there might be a quarter of your learners who are doing TTT. So it's important for some section of your organization and not as much for others. Similar with schools, there's just kind of a wide range of things that people need. So what we do is we have a consultative process where we meet with teams, help them estimate what they're currently spending on materials, and then we only charge a quarter of that direct material cost for the FirstWork subscription. So we can essentially guarantee that you'll cut your material prep cost by 75% by switching over, since we base the pricing on what you're currently spending on materials. And of course, you don't need to purchase those materials when you're using the application.
That is really cool.
I was going to say, being as behavior analytic as we are, and we love seeing numbers and data, like I'm sure that's very convincing for a behavior analyst to be like, okay, now I have a concrete number of how much money I will actually be saving. So that's extremely smart on your guys' part.
Well, thank you. Yeah, the thing that really kind of drove that decision was that one of the things that's kind of funny with material preparation is that there actually is often fairly poor accounting of exactly how much is being spent on material preparation. Admin costs or admin time rather, is a fairly big bucket that often isn't very well differentiated. So most organizations, or really all organizations, can look and say, okay, we spend this much time on admin. This is what we pay different people for that admin time. But it's usually pretty challenging to say, like, we spent 20% of our admin time on this workflow, 20% on that one. So a lot of the time, the time that's being spent ends up being fairly difficult to tie down. And then similarly, printing costs are also a pretty big bucket that most organizations have a pretty good read on. They can more or less estimate from their invoices what they're spending on, ink and lamination and paper. But it's not the only thing that you're going to ever print and laminate. So even if you are using the application, there's still going to be things that you'll print and laminate, for visual supports and things like that. So it's not going to be 100% of your printing costs either. So having that process where we can work with teams to figure out what they are spending, typically is a great way to just kind of elucidate how much is really going into this process. And a lot of the time teams are frankly somewhat surprised to see that, such a significant portion of their prep time or of their material costs are kind of coming from just this one type of activity, since it's so prep and material heavy. You just need lots of paper, lots of ink,
Yeah.
lots of lots of plastic, and ultimately a lot of time to get everything made. So that's been a really neat way to help teams sort of just understand the scope of what we're talking about, and that it's something that's worth really thinking about doing something different for.
Yeah. And overall, I feel like since the last time we spoke, you definitely have collected a lot more data because a lot of these um, decisions or strategies that you're using now for even figuring out, what the cost would be for an administration to use or a school to use or a larger organization. I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure you had all that data last time. So that brings me to my question is, what other business type strategies have you learned along the way to kind of help you with rounding that all out? Because I'm sure you didn't just wake up one day and you're like, oh, that's how it's going to be.
Yeah, no, it's I think a lot of times with entrepreneurship, it's just kind of a process of trying things and seeing what's working well and what isn't working well. So with the pricing, something that we saw was that while we knew that, most organizations were going to come to a certain, price point for, how much they're spending on materials, we realized that that's actually something that was kind of knowledge that we had that organizations didn't necessarily have themselves. And so coming and saying, here's a reasonable price, it's $10 per device, um, doesn't really resonate the same way as, helping somebody understand what they are currently paying and then, basing a price on that, even if the price ends up being very similar to what our, kind of traditional pricing model, which was per unit, per month, look like. So nothing really changed in terms of the substance of it. Like we're essentially charging the same thing that we have always charged. But the way that we communicate that and get to that number is much more consultative, and makes it possible to right size in situations where
Yeah.
that price might actually not have been the right price. And typically, the way that we've kind of come to find these things out is just by iterating over time and seeing where there's strengths in certain models and approaches, and that can be in the sales or in the product development. It's kind of in our general process, and in all cases is trying to you know, closely analyze what we're doing and take a look at places where things could be improved, and kind of continually focus on improving those things. And then over time you end up with something that can look and feel pretty different than where you started. And sometimes there's a lot of substance behind that, and other times it's kind of more of a presentation and the way that things are framed, and a lot of the time that's almost as important.
Mhm.
I know you mentioned that the platform has expanded in a sense of like what you can do with it, and you focused a lot on DTT. But what about that backside graphing portion? Has anything changed when it comes to the graphing section?
Yeah, there's a lot more detail in the graphing section, which is something that we ended up pushing a lot forward through our research study, where we wanted to pull out, a lot of really interesting information about how learners were performing with the application. So everything is auto-tracked and graphed in the app, so you don't need to worry about that concurrent tracking, which is definitely one of the things that is pretty tricky about DTT from a technician standpoint. It's kind of like a juggling act. There's so many different things you have to be doing at the same time. So tracking that data and keeping on top of what's been happening while you're also delivering those programs and supporting a learner can be really difficult to do. So it's all tracked automatically for you. And the graphs and the data collection has become definitely a lot more robust. So you can look into all sorts of different components of what you selected for your program. So like the error correction styles and things like that are included in there. And then there's also some really neat data points which are traditionally pretty difficult to track. So things like latency per trial are included for all of the trials you do. So on top of looking at just your performance, you can also look at the speed you're going at and how that changes over time. So you can kind of look at the look at the data on a little bit more of a multivariate level, which can sometimes pull out things that you might not have otherwise noticed. Since for instance, with latency, most of the time you're not going to be doing stopwatches while you're running your trials. Some folks do, but it's pretty challenging. So you have all that data attached to what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I was gonna say,
Yeah,
like, as a
honestly,
human being, you can only track so much, you know what I mean?
Right.
So having something to automate that for you is pretty amazing. But with that, I do know that things can be faulty or we can get fake data points, whether it be there was an accident and a learner hit something they weren't supposed to. Is it really simple for BCBAs or RBTs to go in and remove data points if there was a mistake?
Yeah, we definitely you definitely can do that. And like you said, whether it's, something that happened that the system
Mhm.
isn't going to capture, maybe there was a prompt that was given that wasn't part of the application. So you could label in that there was a prompt given and what type of prompt
Oh,
that
cool.
was on top of the data. And then sometimes folks like to model, for instance, too. So, you'll run some trials and they're not really like legitimate trials because you're doing them so collaboratively. So you can just go in and delete those trials from your data set if you want to as well. So lots of control there because, like you said, one of the challenges with really any systematic data collection is that systems only look at what they look at. So if we're looking here and something is happening there, that's just not going to be in that frame of view. So it's definitely important to have that second layer of data analysis that can happen where you can sort of label data points or remove data points to kind of bring in any additional context that isn't going to be what's directly captured.
That's really cool, honestly.
And now you said you presented at ABAI, right? This
We did.
past May. How
Yeah.
did that go? What was the feedback? Where are you going next?
It was great. No, we got to show all of our research, and it was fantastic to be together with the research team from Possibilities ABA and Augustana. And the feedback was great. A lot of folks were really excited to see the results that we had, and were in a lot of cases really surprised to see the kind of pace of instruction that was consistent across the trials. And then also the speed of mastery that we saw in the study. At the quickest, we saw targets being mastered in around 6 minutes of total instructional time. So compared
Wow.
to what you might traditionally see, that can be super, super fast. So folks were really excited by the results. And we'll be back at maybe ABI, maybe another conference, but we are working on a much larger research study right now with the same team. And it's going to be focused on older learners. So the first study was more of a pilot study, and it was focused on younger learners who were new to DTT, which was a really neat population to, kind of work with because that's where a lot of DTT happens. But some of the, with learners who are so new to DTT and it's kind of at the edge of their skill range, it's harder to read into that data in a certain sense in some cases. Like it's hard to know whether or not the results were linked to a learner's kind of skill set, or prerequisites, things like that. So this study will be looking at an older population, and we'll be working on associations-based programs. We have about 20 learners who are involved in the study right now, and we'll be able to get some really exciting results on how the learning experience looks with an older population than the one that we got started with. So will be really exciting, and we're definitely thinking it'll be a great study. And we're just getting into the data collection phase now, so don't have anything major to share about what we've learned so far. But we should have the data collection completed by the end of this calendar year, and we'll be thinking about publications soon after that, and where we'll be presenting.
Cool.
That'll be really good.
I think we covered this last time, but I think it's important to touch on again, especially if people didn't hear the first episode of or this question is coming about as they're listening now. A lot of our learners have the ability to X out of things that we'd like them to be doing, and then they go
Right.
to the more preferred things that we don't want them to be doing at that time. Do you want to explain to everybody how you're able to kind of disable that option within the app and then still
Yeah.
use that device as a reinforcer? That way they don't need two different devices like many schools maybe already have, like one work device and one play device.
Yeah, that is one of the most important concepts in FirstWork, honestly. So it's kind of funny. It's just coming up now, but yeah. So for anybody listening, so FirstWork, of course, has the DTT lesson delivery. We have all the types of programs that you need, but we've also been working on making digital learning a little bit more practical, given that problem there, where the device has this huge reinforcing capability, but it's also like a massive distractor. So kind of depending on exactly how it's situated, it's sometimes hard to practically engage with devices because you can always go do something you'd rather do, like go watch a YouTube video. So we essentially have a guided access-based system built into FirstWork. So you can select any application on your device, like YouTube or games or anything else that you might enjoy. And those programs will be limited during your learning lesson. So if you try to go open up YouTube, YouTube will be closed down. So we can kind of close all the doors to everything you shouldn't be able to access while the learning is happening. And then the cool thing with that is that you can also open those doors up to provide access to these fun experiences for a set period of time after your programs are over. So you could, for instance, do 10 questions and then earn 2 minutes on your favorite applications. And then the application will automatically enforce that timer. After the 2 minutes, that app will become restricted again, and you can be brought back to FirstWork to complete another set of questions, which has been a really unique way to make practical to make learning on devices a little bit more practical, and to solve some of those challenges with using devices as a reinforcer. Because one of the big practical dilemmas with introducing screen time as a reward is that you have to, relinquish that at some point. And it's pretty challenging for a technician to, kind of take that device, which is often what you
Right.
need to do, and break up that experience, given that it's something that learners enjoy doing so much. So if you can set more of a app-based and consistent way to kind of turn on and turn off access to those experiences, it sort of separates the technician a little bit from that, removal. And then also makes it easier to expect what's going to happen next and be a little bit more systematic, which is one of the reasons why a lot of folks will choose to actually avoid digital activities as rewards, even if there's something that learners really enjoy. It's just impractical and causes more problems than it solves in a lot of cases to introduce those. So a lot of folks like to avoid that, but with the application, it can be a lot different of an experience, and also something that you can send home with kids, which is kind of a neat component of the app that's been growing over time, is sort of using it as a tool in parent collaboration or just as a way for parents to kind of work on the same programs they're working on in sessions, but at home with legitimate reinforcement that can kind of bring kids to the table to want to engage in the activities.
And then does it have a reverse option where you can lock them out of the app in the case that it is on like a personal device or a device that a district sends home with a learner? That way they can't go home and just start clicking a bunch of things, and
Right.
then you get the tablet back the next day and there's
Get
these
trials.
yeah, right, exactly. Data points all over the place, and then you got to fix that. So is there a reverse to be able to lock the student out when they're not in session?
Yeah, the app is gated essentially at the front. So there's a pin that the adult creates when they first set up the application, and as long as you don't share that pin with your learner, they won't be able to get in there. So the kind of professional or adult portion of the application is kind of locked behind a pin, and then the learning experience component of it is not. So when you set up those programs, you can be sure that you can't get into the back end and start messing around with things, which certainly can happen. So it's definitely an important part of the app to make sure that that's kind of separated for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like you've definitely thought of
I
every
was just thinking that.
counterbalance to like make sure that this is as smooth as possible, not just timely, but effective for the learner, for the data points, for getting all of those finite details, even up to latency, which again, we're human. We can't collect everything at once while also possibly materials are being thrown at us. So as a clinician, thank you.
Oh, well, I appreciate
Um,
that. Yeah, it's been I wish I could take credit for every little detail, but I can't. The way we really built the whole application is with the folks who are using it. And it's been
yeah,
a really great way to kind of keep that North Star in mind to make sure that we're only building things that are important. So, with all the customizations and the content and the way that that reinforcement system works, it's all been really closely tailored based on feedback from folks who are using it every day, to kind of make their sessions more effective. And we found that it's been a fantastic way to, kind of keep making progress towards something that is really excellent. And BCBA has given some of the best feedback in the world. It's, really incredible to work with the population. Everybody has such great ideas and a really
mm,
thoughtful way of thinking about, kind of improving systems. So it's been a really nice marriage of, kind of technology and behavior analytic principles.
I was going to say, being that you have a bunch of behavior analysts at your fingertips, did you schedule timely meetings with them to go over the feedback that they may have had when working with the app from the very beginning? And that's how you guys were able to make those large leaps in terms of internal systems and like what you can do with the app? Or was it just you provided them with like a survey and then you applied what the survey had said?
No, it's more of the former. We launched the application with about 1,000 BCBAs in a beta, and that was where we got our first set of feedback. And so
Mhm.
folks who were doing it would be with us, and we'd be able to chat with them and just kind of hear their thoughts about things that could be better. And that provided us a lot of initial feedback. So we had we were pretty busy for a while with, kind of addressing some of those initial thoughts that a lot of folks had. And the neat thing with being able to work with a wide group of people is that it helps, kind of crystallize what components are the most important to a lot of people. So if you're hearing the same thing from a lot of different people, that's probably something that's really important to focus in on. And so we have regular conversations with folks who are trying the application for the first time or have been using it for a long time. And we like to make sure we're always checking in with folks whenever we can, just to have those conversations and hear about things that are kind of on their wish list, or might be easier for them. And through those regular conversations, which we're always having, we kind of fill out that list of things that are on somebody's mind. And then typically we look to try to solve the problems that are most important to the most people. So that's kind of been our general framework is, the things that are, kind of pressing to a lot of people are the things that we give the most priority to. And over time, we found that the nuance of the things that we're working on has gotten, kind of tighter and tighter. So initially it was things like, hey, like you only have matching and receptive. We should be able to work on feature function class. So you build that kind of program. And now it's a lot of things that are, this would be a really neat way to add an additional layer for data visualization. Like I'd like to be able to see this phase change line, for instance. It'd be cool if we could add that in. So just kind of getting tighter and tighter in terms of our vision and what's important has kind of been the trend over time. Like as you solve those bigger problems, the problems get smaller and kind of more technical, which has been kind of fun. It's been a neat way to see the progress progressing kind of in terms of the scope of the feedback essentially being smaller over time.
Now, jumping back a little bit to conferences, you as an entrepreneur, what was the reception like from when you first started? Because again, you were kind of just getting your feet wet. You were doing more of like an intro, like, hey, I'm Patrick. This is the system I have, to last at ABAI, to where people were probably like, hey, Patrick, like,
Yeah.
love this system. What was that like for you? Like as the again, entrepreneur, the visionary for this, what did that mean for you?
It was really neat. I love the ABA community. I think it's just full of so many great people. And as you all know, it's a fairly small world. So at the beginning, it kind of felt like the first time I was at ABA, it was kind of funny. I felt like it was kind of recently post COVID. I hadn't been in like a social setting like that, and just from LinkedIn or conversations online, I felt like everywhere I turned, I saw somebody who I had seen online somewhere or kind of met briefly on the internet. And kind of with time, it's been pretty neat to just know so many people and kind of have that community of supporters and just be involved in the community in a more meaningful way. So it's been really neat and kind of similar to that, kind of feedback getting smaller over time. It's kind of neat to go to a big conference and instead of being like, oh, hey, there's this person I've seen posting a lot on LinkedIn. It's like, oh, this is my buddy. We've
Yeah.
we've done this and this together. So it's been pretty cool over time just to get more involved in the community and get to know all the wonderful people involved. And yeah, there's just a finite number of people. So after a while, it kind of looks daunting at the beginning, but you sort of realize that you'll come to meet almost everybody who's kind of in the public sphere in ABA fairly quickly if you enter the space in
Yeah.
earnest.
So it's interesting you say that because right before this podcast, I opened up Instagram and there's this BCBA that I follow, and she was posting an Instagram reel, and it was about FirstWork. And I started reading it, and then I read the caption because it's about laminating. It was like,
Mhm.
something about you don't want to be laminating anymore. And then it goes into her talking about FirstWork, and I was like, that's so cool because it's just a BCBA that I follow, and there she is talking about your app.
That's so neat.
Oh,
Yeah,
listening.
it's a small
Yeah.
world. It really is. That's such funny timing though that it happened right before you popped on.
Yeah.
Brandon kind of asked you on the forefront what the initial was for the app, right? So where would you like to see the app going next year? Maybe you
Yeah,
wouldn't be touched.
it's a great question. The so the the thing that we've seen over time is larger and larger organizations have started using FirstWork as their primary way to deliver TTT. So that's something that we want to keep working on. We're working with a lot of really wonderful large teams and hope to continue working with bigger and bigger groups and just kind of making this something that's more of a status quo over time. So that's a big focus of ours in ABA, and it's the best way for us to continue growing the platform and really sort of working on some of those context-based use problems. The application sort of started as something that was more geared towards use in smaller settings, and there's kind of different ways of deploying systems at scale and different ways of thinking about how systems work. So we've really been kind of digging into that, and that's been a big focus of ours. And then way on the other side of the coin, kind of the exact opposite thing, we've started to see more and more people using the application at home with families and kind of using it as something that can increase the scale of what's possible with the same amount of time in the day. It's not traditionally very easy to introduce that kind of programming at home, but with an application, you can make programs, share them with families, and they can deliver the exact programs that you created. So finding new ways to expand the usage of FirstWork as something that isn't just done in ABA sessions, but is also done, kind of in a parent consultative framework and at home as well. So I'd say that those are the two places that we're really focused on right now. And personally, I'm really excited about the ability to kind of get some of this behavior analytics stuff into the hands of families so that they can continue working on what they're working on in sessions, or even if they're waiting for services, and just expanding what's possible with the application outside of sessions is something that I'm personally really passionate about, because as we all know, there's just not enough BCBAs out there to work with everybody. So, not everybody can get all the hours that they want. Not everybody can get into services quickly enough. So that's a place where I feel like there's a unique opportunity for technology to hopefully bridge that gap a little bit and just create more options for folks who want to do more or want to get started with something that they are waiting to get started with.
Yeah, I guess I never thought about that and how it could help the continuity across people, like not just with the ABA practitioners, but with the family members as well. Because I'm sure
that they can follow.
Right. Because I'm sure we've all worked with that learner. You come back in on Monday, and then just with those 2 days, there's such a large regression in the skill set they may have obtained throughout the 5 days that you work with them. And that 2 days is just too much for them to retain that and carry it into Monday. So being able to hand over that framework to the family and say, hey, it's already all set up for you. Just provide the contingency of first do your trials, and then you can do X, Y, and Z, and then they just kind of turn it on. It reduces a lot of, again, that response effort, the training on the front side, and it really gives them the ability to have that homework, like you were saying, and just give them more opportunities to practice those skills across multiple days throughout the week.
Yeah, no, I totally agreed. It's kind of like, it's sort of like a mini summer break, every week. Sometimes that, continuity can be really important, even if it's just something little that you can do for a couple minutes that can kind of keep you, keep you active and thinking about the same sorts of things. So, so we're excited to see the different ways that can play out. And, like I was saying before, behavior analysts are wonderful and creative. And so it's been really cool to see some of the ways that folks have already been using it. And, we're working on finding ways to make that easier and make that a bigger part of what folks do, hopefully.
Yeah.
Well, we can't wait to see what else comes in the very near future.
Yeah. So I guess for any of our listeners, I know if people are tuning in again, they know where to find you. But for any of our new listeners, where can they find you and where can they find your app?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, my local watering hole. If you search Patrick Vega, I will certainly pop up. And then if you're interested in learning more about the application, you can check out firstworkapp.com or go to the App Store or Google Play Store and search FirstWork, one word, and it'll pop up there, and it's free to download and try. So if you're interested, definitely give it a shot and just kind of see what you think. It's easy to get started and start playing around with it.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Well, thank you. We appreciate this, and we look forward to catching up with you again.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for the opportunity to come on and catch up.
Of course. Thank you.
Check out thekarmacollection.com for stylish, ABA-inspired apparel that spreads the message of behavior science with every wear. Free shipping on orders over $120. thekarmacollection.com